This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin this hour with the tragedy in Pittsburgh. 46-year-old Robert Bowers made his first court appearance today. Police arrested him following Saturday's mass shooting. Fear and panic filled services at the Tree of Life Synagogue as a gunman entered the sanctuary, killing 11 people and injuring another 6. The victims have been identified, and deleted social media posts show hatred Robert Bowers spouted for Jews, with anti-Semitic rhetoric and calls for genocide.
He had sought out this one synagogue because of activities that they had done working with refugees and immigrants.
Bowers has been called a loner by his neighbors and flew under police radar. He could now face the death penalty if convicted. The deadly attack is being treated as a hate crime. Israeli leaders have offered words of comfort to American Jews following that massacre Saturday in Pittsburgh. This comes from a country that suffered from terror attacks for decades. Their message was, we must fight anti-Semitism. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem lit up the old city walls with American and Israeli flags in support of American Jewry after 11 Jews were murdered during morning prayers at a Pittsburgh synagogue.
I feel your pain today, and with me is the entire Jewish people. It is hard for us to believe, hard for us to understand how hatred and evil rose up to damage and to uproot the tree of life.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin sent a taped message to an interfaith memorial service on Sunday. It was the worst attack against the Jewish community in U.S. history.
We must say loud and clear, this was an attack of anti-Semitism. Our brothers and sisters, friends and family were murdered because they were Jews.
At least 2,000 mourners packed the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Pittsburgh and stood to recite the Jewish mourners' prayer with Rivlin. Israel sent Government Minister Naftali Bennett to Pittsburgh to console the community shortly after the attack. Bennett also addressed the crowd and told them that hating Jews is not a distant memory. From Sderot to Pittsburgh, the hand that fires missiles is the same hand that shoots worshipers. We will fight against the hatred of Jews and anti-Semitism wherever it raises its head, and we will prevail. Uncharacteristically, the governments of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar all made statements condemning the attack, and even the Palestinian Authority referred to it as an act of terrorism. Back home, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and cabinet ministers opened their weekly meeting with a minute of silence. Netanyahu issued a call for the whole world to unite to fight anti-Semitism in every form.
We must stand and fight back against all these fronts, against this zealous, brutal anti-Semitism, which starts with Jews and never ends with Jews.
Shortly after the attack, Netanyahu released a video in English summing up the sentiments of Israel.
The entire people of Israel grieve with the families of the dead. We stand together with the Jewish community of Pittsburgh. We stand together with the American people in the face of this horrendous anti-Semitic brutality. And we all pray for the speedy recovery of the wounded.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Back here in the United States, accused mail bomber Cesar Sayak made his first appearance in court. Sayak was arrested Friday. Today, he entered a plea of not guilty in a Miami federal courtroom. After the quick appearance, Sayak was transferred to a U.S. Southern District of New York for trial. Sayak is facing 5 federal charges in connection with mailing bomb-like devices across the country to Democrats and media personalities. Angela Merkel is stepping down as the leader of Germany's Conservative Party, a post she's held for 18 years. She also says she will not be seeking a 5th term as Chancellor in 2021. Joining us right now from the CBN newsroom with analysis on Merkel's departure is CBN senior international correspondent Dale Hurd. So, Dale, Angela Merkel had been one of Germany's most popular post-war chancellors. What happened?
Crime, fear. This was local. As much as we hear that everything's fine in Germany, it's not. A lot of it's covered up, and you go to small towns and people are afraid, and there are attacks, and it's because of immigration from the Islamic world, and it's starting to bite politically.
So where are the political winds blowing right now in Germany?
Sort of to the right, although Germany's afraid of the right because it thinks of its past, and Germans treasure stability because of their past, and that's what they've liked about Merkel. But Alternative for Germany, the right-wing party, it's interesting, its gains match Merkel's losses almost exactly, so you can see where Merkel's voters have gone.
What impact will Merkel stepping down have on the European Union, you think?
I think it'll have a major impact because her stepping down may cause her coalition to collapse, and she may no longer be chancellor in weeks, months. We'll have to see. She's been a major pillar of the European Union, and other politicians in Germany are not nearly as sold on the European Union as something that's good for Germany.
All right, Dale Hurd, one to watch. Thank you so much for your insight. A Kentucky man faces possible hate crime charges in the killing of 2 black people at a grocery store in a Louisville, Kentucky suburb last week. Police say Gregory Bush apparently tried to enter a predominantly black church but failed just minutes before going to that Kroger grocery store and opening fire. A surveillance video confirmed that Bush had been at the Jefferson Township Baptist Church about 10 to 15 minutes before he went to that Kroger's grocery store. Brazil has elected right-wing Congressman Jair Bolsonaro as its new president. His victory reflected widespread anger at the political class after years of corruption, a struggling economy, and a surge in violence. Bolsonaro ran on promises to clean up Brazil and bring back traditional values. And he said he would respect the Constitution and personal liberty. He told supporters, quote, "This is a promise, not of a party, not of the vain word of a man. It is a promise to God." Brazil's Supreme Court president warned Bolsonaro following his victory he must be loyal to the Constitution, the democratic state, and to the other powers and government institutions. Masterpiece cake shop baker Jack Phillips is now both on offense and defense as Colorado comes after him yet again, this time for refusing to bake a cake to mark a transgender changing from male to female. But at the same time, he is suing the state. Paul Strand looks at why his battles with Colorado and the implications for free speech matter so much for Christians.
Baker Jack Phillips, all he wants to do is make cakes. But it seems all Colorado wants to do is make trouble for Jack.
The state agency acting against Phillips lost here at the U.S. Supreme Court, with justices specifically blasting it for hostility toward Phillips' religious beliefs. Now the Colorado Civil Rights Commission is going after the Christian baker again, this time for refusing a transgender celebration cake.
At this point, they're just targeting Christians. This is outright Christian persecution.
This time around, though, constitutional attorney Jenna Ellis believes the commission will be more subtle.
The Masterpiece decision was very particular to the commission to say you cannot be overtly hostile. So now what they're doing is they're just going to say, well, we won't be as obvious about our hostility, but we still want to go after Jack.
Meanwhile, Phillips and his lawyers are going on offense by suing the Colorado bureaucrats.
They are actually striking back and saying, this is just outright persecution. You're not interested in stopping discrimination. You're interested in hunting Christians down.
If Christians are always only on the defensive, then we're going to continue to lose ground eventually. We have to be also making sure that we're standing up and we're standing forward.
Ellis and Hunt warned people of faith should be deeply concerned about their religious freedom, given some of today's leaders and officials.
Even after the Colorado Civil Rights Commission heard from the U.S. Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision, including Obama appointees telling them to stop targeting people of faith, the government essentially ignored it.
This is about whether or not the government can compel you or me to say something and to embrace and celebrate messages that go against our sincerely held religious beliefs.
Jack Phillips is very much a canary in the coal mine with regards to the very legal issues, very important legal issues that we're going to be facing.
So why care about this one baker and his little Masterpiece cake shop in a suburb of Denver? Because if you hold certain beliefs and you're a Christian, you could be the next Jack Phillips. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. It's been 2 weeks since a group of Hondurans left their homes with plans to walk to the United States for asylum, resulting in a caravan of thousands who joined along the way. Most plan to cross into the U.S. illegally, and that's raising questions about the motivations of those supporting and encouraging this group. Our Chuck Colton brings us that story from the caravan itself in Mexico.
Honduras, Honduras,
Honduras! Honduras!
The massive caravan currently making its way north through Mexico is no isolated event. Immigrants from around the world have traveled this route for decades. Making the 1,400-mile trek is always a difficult and dangerous undertaking. It would be all but impossible if it weren't for some organizations that encourage and assist these travelers on their way. This most recent caravan has prompted many to ask about who is helping facilitate what's becoming one of the largest mass migrations in modern history. I interviewed some who were helping these Hondurans make it to the United States.
Tortas, ya se dieron tamales en la mañana, café, pan.
Venimos a apoyar a la Iglesia Primera del Nazareno de aquí de Whistler, en apoyo a todos los hermanos que vienen de Centroamérica, dándoles agua, comida, ropa y todo lo que ellos necesitan. Estamos para...
Mexico recently elected a pro-migrant president, but the Mexican government is having trouble deciding how or even if they should help these migrants who have come into their country illegally.
So I'm just outside of Tapachula in southern Mexico, and a group of migrants just walked by. They're behind the main group, but it's still a couple hundred people, and they were stopped by some immigration agents in several immigration vans, basically just encouraging them to take the legal steps necessary to declare asylum in Mexico. But the migrants didn't like that idea and they ran off. And so now the police and the immigration authorities are kind of standing around trying to figure out what to do.
When the confrontation happened, another group of supporters showed up. A left-wing group committed to open borders and gun control called the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation stepped between the migrants and the Mexican police.
Nosotros estamos brindando la ayuda necesaria de acuerdo a la ley.
And they didn't want to be filmed.
Disculpe, ¿por qué está tomando fotos?
Nosotros no estamos ni atacando, ni lesionando, ni nada. Estamos brindando el apoyo.
I don't think anyone can see these images of women marching in the hot sun or sleeping on the streets at night with their babies and not have it tug at their heartstrings. But many people are starting to ask whether or not charity has to include encouraging people to make bad choices.
They don't need to leave. They can stay, set in roots, and develop their own land.
Graham and Nicole Davis moved to Central America 5 years ago to help young people break the cycle of violence and poverty.
We have based our foundation on the obvious principles that it makes more sense to meet people where they are. It's much more cost effective and it's much more successful than moving them across borders and forcing them into a new education system. We meet them right where they are and care for them, and they grow. We're earning the right to be heard by moving into their neighborhood and educating them. Our students aren't running for the border. They see the value in being where they are and growing in leadership. The Advance Project develops leaders in the developing world. That's what we do.
Through mentoring, education, leadership, and the gospel, this family is making a difference by showing a young generation of Central Americans that they don't necessarily need the United States. What they need is Jesus. For CBN News, I'm Chuck Holton in Chiapas State, Mexico.
And Rev Tony Sora is one of the President's faith advisors and Executive Vice President of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, joins us now with more on these events. Well, let me begin. The President has called this an invasion and is deploying thousands of troops to the border. Do you consider this caravan to be an invasion?
I don't believe it to be an invasion, but this is a great dichotomy of understanding that we have to protect the right of real refugees being able to seek asylum in our country while at the same time protecting our borders and not allowing people to just flow in illegally.
Do you think that deploying troops to the border is a good idea?
I think we need to do whatever it takes to secure and protect our border. To me, it goes beyond building walls and sending troops. It's fixing this broken entry and exit system that exists because the House and the Senate have not acted for 30 years. If you and I didn't do our job for 30 days, we wouldn't be on the air. They've gone 3 decades without solving an immigration crisis, yet they're giving a pass and they're reelected term after term. That, in my opinion, is the real reason why we're having this problem today at the border.
We're about to face another election just a week away. Now, you've been an advocate for immigration reform for many years, and as you just mentioned, seen no real progress from Congress. What's your hope at this point?
My hope is that we would lay politics aside. I work as Executive Vice President of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, and our president, Pastor Sam Rodriguez, has said time and time again that Christians and voters, we can't be married to one agenda or the other. It can't be the agenda of the elephant or the agenda of the donkey. It must be the agenda of the Lamb. And we as believers and as Americans need to vote according to that agenda. And that is an agenda of peace. It's an agenda of love. It's an agenda of hope, which I believe is not just the basis of Christianity, but I believe it's the foundation of our nation as well.
While we have you here, another big story we've been following is, of course, the shooting that happened over the weekend in Pittsburgh. Watching what happened and seeing what's unfolding in our country, do you blame the increasing polarization and inflammatory rhetoric that we're hearing for what we're seeing?
I do. I blame the rhetoric. The rhetoric has to come to an end. We have to stop pointing fingers. We have to stop looking at someone and trying to figure out, are you Republican or Democrat? That's my brother. That's my sister in the Lord. We've for so long have promoted this. I don't see color. I don't see religion. Well, we're at a time where we might not see color or religion, but we sure do see political party. And on that line, we're dividing and we're spewing hate. It is ungodly, and it's ungodly within the body of Christ. We should be the ambassadors of peace and light. Pastor Sam talks so much about it. I've heard him as my mentor. He'd said the only thing that can drive out darkness is light, and we're called to be the light of the world. And as Christians, through our vote and through our testimony, our public witness, we must bring a message of peace to this world that desperately needs it.
Indeed. Following incidents like this, we often feel helpless and hopeless as believers in terms of what do you do, what do you say, how do you respond? What do you think we as believers should be doing right now to respond to this?
I think that in a moment when you don't know what to say, you do as the psalmist says, and you lift thy eyes to the hill from whence cometh thy help. I don't have the answer. I don't know why that anger is there, why that rage is there. But all I know to do is to pray and to ask God to help me, to give me peace, give my children peace, and be a healer to this land that desperately needs healing.
Right. Thank you so much, Rev Tony Sora, for your insight. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
The state of Oregon dismissed criminal charges against a judge who says he was targeted for his Christian beliefs. Charges against Judge Vance Day stem from his time as the judge presiding over the Marion County Veterans Treatment Court and his interactions. We'll get more on that story coming up right after this. Criminal charges against a judge who says he was targeted for his Christian beliefs. Charges against Judge Vance Day stem from his time as the judge presiding over the Marion County Veterans Treatment Court and his interactions with a Navy SEAL who was a convicted felon and defended in the court. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell is a friend of Judge Day, and Mark Martin spoke with him about the case.
You were classmates with Judge Day at Regent University. What went through your mind when you heard that the felony firearms charges had been dropped against him?
Well, it was a day of great joy just a few days ago to learn about that. Vance Day is a superb human being. I got to know him 30 years ago here at Regent. We've kept in touch over the years. He married a young lady here from Regent, great family man. But we've kept in touch over these last couple of years, especially as he's been targeted for prosecution and I think persecution for his Christian faith simply because he chose not to perform a same-sex marriage. In Oregon, it's permissible for judges to do it, but not required. He quietly declined to do one, and I think the series of criminal charges, of bar complaints, and persecution by the Oregon Attorney General's office and others has all stemmed from that. But we take this victory as a sign of God's providence and his protection over Judge Day. It was a frivolous case to start with. The witness didn't even show up. It was a one-witness case. And, I think the government probably knew that was going to happen.
So you yourself, you're no stranger to the courts. Right. You actually faced 2 years in prison after being convicted of political corruption. But the United States Supreme Court voted unanimously to overturn your conviction. Does this case remind you of what you went through?
Well, it does to some degree. Each case is different, but I just believed with all my heart that the charges that came against not only me, but my wife and indirectly my entire family were completely wrong. And ultimately, after 42 months and $27 million of legal fees, the United States Supreme Court unanimously vindicated us. But I just get that sense in my case that the prosecution was wrong from the beginning and should have known it. And I think equally in Judge Day's case, that there were perhaps other motives for targeting him for prosecution that had more to do about his Christian beliefs and less to do about the law. And so it's when God vindicates his people, it's a time for great celebration. In my own case, God gave me early on in my prosecution Psalm 35, and at the end of that it says, vindicate me in your righteousness, O God. Contend for me, my Lord and my God. Awake and rise to my defense. And so that's what I knew from the beginning that was going to be my story of the case. And of course, God delivered in a great way in the United States Supreme Court unanimously, and now with Judge Day by having the government have to drop the charges because the witness didn't show up.
Well, you are a man of great faith yourself, and then talk about, for me, the faith of Judge Day.
He is such a genuine, authentic person. I realized that 30 years ago when we were in the master's degree program in government here at Regent University. We were in prayer groups together, and I just know over the years he was a person that took his faith, his political views, and his practice of law very seriously. He had been actively involved in the Republican Party in Oregon, which makes you pretty much a minority in that state. But I always found him to be resolute in what he believed politically, theologically, and spiritually, just a very genuine man.
Governor Bob McDonnell, the former governor of Virginia, thank you so much for your time and your insights
Mark.
today, sir.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Judge Day is still suspended from the bench as the Oregon Bar investigates 2 ethics complaints. We'll be right back. The Boston Red Sox won the World Series last night, swamping the Los Angeles Dodgers in L.A. by a score of 5-1. It was the Red Sox's 4th World Series title in the last 15 years, and they did it convincingly, beating the National League champion Dodgers 4-1. This Red Sox team will go down in history as one of the best ever. They won a franchise record 108 games in the regular season. Adding in the playoffs, they won 119 games overall, the 3rd highest in baseball history. Congratulations to them. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And we'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a marvelous Monday and a wonderful week. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.